Carson this evening. So with that, I'll introduce our keynote speaker for tonight. Our keynote speaker is someone who, like Rachel Carson, has taken environmental knowledge and environmental perspectives to a broader public. Jenny Price is a writer, a Los Angeles urban ranger, a research scholar at the UCLA Center for the Study of Women. She's written often about the environment, about Los Angeles, about environmentalism, about gun control, the Malibu beach access wars, public space, and swag lounges, among other things. She's the author of 13 Ways of Seeing Nature in LA and Flight Maps, Adventures with Nature in Modern America. She's also written for a wide variety of magazines, including Sunset, Audubon, the New York Times, Los Angeles Times as well, and writes a blog, Green Me Up, the not quite advice column on LA Observed for the LA Times. She gives frequent tours of the concrete Los Angeles River to emphasize its central importance to LA's past, present, and future. With the LA Urban Rangers Art Collective, she has conducted such projects as Downtown LA Trail System, and Public Access 101, Malibu Public Beaches. She's led workshops in the US and abroad and has been a resident artist at the Orange County Museum of Art and the Museum of Contemporary Art. She's taught at UCLA, USC, and Antioch, Los Angeles, has been a Guggenheim and two-time NEH Fellow, and was the Anschutz Distinguished Fellow in American Studies at Princeton University in fall 2011. She has an A.D. from Princeton, where as a biology major she studied the white-winged trumpeters of the Amazon rainforest, and a Ph.D. in history from Yale University, where she studied the plastic pink flamingos of the American grasslands. She lives on Venice Beach. With that, I'll turn things over to Jenny.
Does everybody hear me? Is the mic okay? Just want to say first, it's really incredible, wonderful to be here and to be up here tonight. I gave my first paper at the ASEH, shaking, reading it. Bill Cronin, my mentor, said, you know, you really need to go to Tacoma and give a paper at the ASEH. And I went, okay, Bill wants me to go to Tacoma, I guess I'll call the airlines. And he said, and by the way, I'm not going to be there. But you can go as a second-year graduate student on your own. Not knowing anyone else there, and you'll be fine. And I was, and I gave my second paper at the ASEH. Maybe not my third, but probably my fourth. I really grew up as a scholar in this field, and it was a really warm and hospitable place to grow up. So it's really meaningful to me to be back here now after being away for so long, and also especially to be back here in Madison, which is now has been Bill's hometown since he was born, but now where he teaches. Okay. So Rachel Carson was a visionary. She's a towering figure in the modern environmental movement. She's widely considered to be its founding voice, and she has remained its conscience. In love with nature since she was a child, she went on to a career as an aquatic biologist with the Fish and Wildlife Service and broke down many gender barriers to do so, and then to write best-selling books, science and natural history books about the sea. Her writing combined remarkable factual accuracy with remarkable lyricism. In 1962, her fearless book, Silent Spring, which exposed the widespread dangers of DDT and other pesticides and forthrightly attacked the chemical industry, helped ignite widespread environmental awareness, and in the ensuing decade, not only led the EPA to ban the domestic use of DDT, but also led to the EPA itself, the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, and Earth Day. After she died 2 years later of breast cancer, her last posthumous book, The Sense of Wonder, about her nature outings with her grandnephew Roger, would celebrate the importance of introducing children to the joys of nature to nourish their capacity for wonder. But you already know that. This room is full of environmental historians, and I bet 9 out of 10 of you know everything I just said and more. That in the wake of Silent Spring, the chemical industry attacks her as an hysteric, a spinster, a communist. That President Kennedy directs his Science Advisory Committee to launch a report on pesticide safety, and that Congress convenes a hearing at which Carson testifies. You know all that. There's a very sizable literature on Rachel Carson, by historians and by scientists, writers, activists, biographies, children's books, commemorative anthologies, documentaries. In 1980, In 1980, Roger accepts the Presidential Medal of Freedom on her behalf. By 1996, she's on Time's list of the 100 most influential people who shaped the century. In A&E Biography's TV special on the 100 most influential people of the millennium, which they count down in order of importance, she's number 87, more significant than Eleanor Roosevelt, Suleiman I, and Steven Spielberg, and only 11 slots behind the Beatles. Though way behind Mozart, Genghis Khan, Mao, Dante, Hitler, and Bill Gates. And ironically, also James Watt, who thankfully isn't that James Watt, but rather the inventor of the steam engine and father of the Industrial Revolution, which of course is almost as ironic. The catalog for the LA County Library System includes 23 children's books about Rachel Carson, and she's in 12 of the anthologies about important environmentalists, Americans, scientists, or women. John Muir has a few more books, 27, but he's in only 5 anthologies. Aldo Leopold is 2 and 4, 2 books, 4 anthologies. Gandhi, 24 books, but only 10 anthologies. And Mother Teresa, 25 books and 2 anthologies. So basically, she's maybe running a little ahead of Gandhi and Mother Teresa. And in the 1993 PBS American Experience documentary, Meryl Streep does Carson's voice. Meryl Streep. With an uncanny Rachel Carson accent. It's actually true, it's very hard to tell them apart. Okay, Rachel Carson is a hero. I'm sure many of you agree with me on that. We've seen a lot of books since 1962 that have brilliantly exposed a lot of environmental messes, but Silent Spring still stands out. It blows me away for what it accomplished, but also I'm a writer, and it blows me away with its precision, its poetry, and again, because it is just utterly without fear. Still. Right now, I've got a pile, more like 5 piles, of books about Rachel Carson on my coffee table at home. And when you read this literature, well, one of the things that really fascinates me is how consistently, or really wholly and entirely hagiographic it is. Almost relentlessly hagiographic. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen quite anything like it. Certainly not for Muir or Leopold, or any other figure I can think of in environmental history. Not for Eleanor Roosevelt. And Mother Teresa, I did a quick Google, and yeah, there's a lot of criticism. Yes, in the 1960s, the chemical industry and its many defenders attack her and says she wants the Russians to win and the insects to take over the world, or maybe both. And the industry, though it's gotten more polite, has continued to spew skepticism. And in the recent renewal of the debate over DDT, some self-appointed bloggers on the extreme right-wing end claim she's murdered 35 million Africans who have died of malaria, and Hitler killed a lot fewer people, and so forth. But among the environmentalists and historians and writers, the mainstream literature on her life and legacy, well, this is the most G-rated bio I've ever seen. But what really intrigues me most is that there are almost no hard questions about her. I'm generalizing a bit, but it's almost all about what we might learn from her life and work. The literature asks questions about Rachel Carson, but to my knowledge doesn't really question her decisions, her writing, her beliefs, her motives. And that should jolt any historian awake. First of all, no one lives a G-rated life. What really seems odd here, though, is that Rachel Carson was born in 1907, 105 years ago, 12 years before my father, who was 40 when I was born, and I'm now profoundly middle-aged, which I'm not allowed to say in Los Angeles, so it's really fun to be here. They, kick you out. They issue you a warning, and the next time they kick you out. It's nice to be in my native Midwest. Silent Spring was published in 1962, and her first book, Under the Sea Wind, in 1941. In the ensuing 50 to 70 years, has there been anything at all, that we might have determined we shouldn't learn from her? History, to paraphrase my favorite quote, is the art of making the strange familiar and the familiar strange. That's our power, right? To recognize the past as strange and then to understand its logic, and thereby to render the present, the things we take for granted, fully historical, a little bit strange, so we can question the present, make it seem not so inevitable, and thereby know that we can shape the future. It seems to me, though, especially as I read about Rachel Carson's beliefs and ideas, that we're making the familiar familiar. Rachel Carson herself, and especially I think her ideas, aren't quite in history. Here's my dad. He's my hero, to be honest. He had as much integrity. Sorry, tomorrow's his yard site. He had as much integrity as anyone I'll ever know, or will ever know of, and I like to think that anything that's right about my ideas and values comes from my father. As a lawyer, he defended people on the blacklist during the McCarthy era, and he fought hard for desegregation. But did I find any of his ideas problematic? Saying about capitalism, forged through his experience in the Depression, World War II, and the post-war middle-class expansion? Oh yeah. I used to tell him that my politics were just his politics, but if you took them to their logical conclusion. And my dad, in turn, who was born in 1919, thought that pronouncement from his beloved baby boomer daughter was a load of crap. My guess is that almost everyone in this room is both an historian and environmentalist. So tonight, I want to take a stab at making Carson's ideas not so timelessly right and not so inevitably ours. Not to debunk Carson, not at all, and not to deconstruct because it's so fun, or I just can, but to use the powers of history to ask questions about contemporary environmentalism and the things we most believe in. So, when I read the literature about Carson, along with Carson's work itself, I find that I keep asking a few questions. There are 3 questions, actually, that I keep wanting more on that just nag at me. The first is, why the sea? Actually, this question has been asked a lot, but I think we can ask more questions about the answers. So the first is, why the sea? Then, what did Roger think? And why no criticism? My own attempt to interpret Rachel Carson in history comes from trying to answer these 3 questions. I'll do this fast, at least initially. I'll confess I'm a little scared to do this. But my stab might go something like this. Rachel Carson had a difficult childhood, a solitary and often painful childhood. Her only close relationship is with her mother, who in the early 1900s, when Carson was born, was a disciple of the nature study movement. And as a child, Carson finds in the wilds of nature much beauty and wonder, and also great solace, a refuge from the very painful and frequent twists of fate in her family. And this will continue into what will in many ways become a painful adulthood, marked by a degree of social isolation along with frequent crises in her career, and especially at home, and will lead above all to Carson's great love of the sea. And to Carson, the ocean becomes the part of the natural world where she finds the most solace, that is least human, that's outside human control, and governed instead by timeless, eternal rhythms. And that's so vast that humans can't possibly change it. And when she writes Silent Spring, her only political book, and the only one that's not about the sea, she does it in real part out of concern for people and other living things and the ecosystems they share. But her real fundamental motive is that after World War II, with the 1-2 punch of 1, the bomb and nuclear fallout, and 2, the dangerous spread of toxic pesticides, she concludes that in fact no part of nature is outside her control or the power of humans to alter or degrade or outright destroy it. And she in fact mostly writes Silent Spring out of the depths of heartbreaking disappointment and real anger that even her beloved sea is not inviolable. And then, after the publication of Silent Spring, the specific circumstances of her personal and professional life as a woman stir up a kind of perfect storm of the intertwined meanings of women, nature, virtue, authenticity, and history, in which Rachel Carson is the perfect apostle for the idea of nature as authentic and timeless, an idea that is so often rendered the idea itself outside of history and also resistant to critique, and that in turn can render its perfect apostle resistant to historicization and immune to criticism. How many of you are thinking, that's a load of crap? You can be honest. No hands? Okay. How many of you are thinking, but what about Roger? What happens to Roger? Okay, I'm going to get back to Roger in a little bit, but don't worry, Roger's fine. Was Rachel Carson a superb scientist? Yes. Was she a singularly gifted writer? Yes. Was Silent Spring important? We might not have the EPA, or bald eagles for that matter, without it. Do I admire Rachel Carson? Oh my God, she rocks. This is the rather slight woman who says, in response to the common assumption by people who have read her work but have never seen her, and assume she must be absolutely huge, I can offer no excuse for not being what people expect. The woman who knows, as she's writing Silent Spring, that she'll be viciously and widely attacked for being emotional and hysterical and a female know-nothing, and who, in the pre-feminist era of the early 1960s, when the agricultural scientist, who's the major spokesman for the chemical industry, gives 28 speeches in the 3 months after Silent Spring is published and essentially froths at the mouth, while she, calmly and coolly, while she's dying of cancer, grants CBS one interview and blows the other guy out of the water by coming off as a clearly knowledgeable scientist and as the quintessential voice of reason. Was Rachel Carson a saint or a prophet? No, she was human. And 50 to 100 years later, her legacy is and must be inevitably mixed.